I found that I was, well, unable to leave Beijing. It was a place that I just wanted to stay in. Really just a celebration of what I love to do, and also a celebration of the city that I love, which is Beijing. I remember Kang Ai, my neighbor, she threw out an old Chinese thermos. She didn't want it anymore, but I thought it was really interesting, so I collected it. I took a picture of it, and then I added Beijing, and I put it on a t-shirt and added in some color. Other thing I took was an old food ticket that I found in the Hutong. It was this beautiful little ticket, and it was what people used in the 1970s and 80s to buy food. I started taking objects and things that were around me that I found interesting. And so over the 12 years, we've created hundreds of designs that have celebrated, Beijing and China and my life here. Starting off with the simple tickets, the subway tickets, the food tickets, and the iconic objects. And it's been fascinating, to discover all of these different things that have gone into our artwork as I went on that journey. I came to China in 1993. I didn't speak Chinese, and I knew nothing about Beijing and its history. But I kind of felt like Beijing was my own city because there were so few foreigners here, and living in the Hutongs, it kind of felt like it was my own palace, my own place. But it was through the people I met in Beijing that I got to understand the city. So in 2003, my wife and I were living in an apartment in Sanlitun with our daughter. And we really wanted to return to the Hutongs because we loved the Hutongs, and also to raise our daughter so that she could be with other families together. And growing up in the courtyard house was a beautiful experience for the children. The children became sort of quintessential Hutong kids. The evening of Chinese New Year, when we have a big celebration, and we watch the Chinese New Year Spring Festival show, and then we eat Chinese jiaozi. I guess falling in love with Beijing was not a sudden process. It kind of took some time. For me, it was fascinating because it was all brand new. It was a new language, it was a new culture, it was a new way of living, new food, and all of this was incredibly inspiring for all the senses. So it's the 1960s to the 70s, the 80s, from collecting its old vintage and objects, which is something I'm very passionate about, to having conversations with people. And as soon as I learned Chinese, the more I knew about Beijing, I became fascinated with the culture. So when I started my brand 12 years ago, and so the whole t-shirt culture was very new to Beijing. And I think the Chinese customers found quite surprising. They found it interesting, but they wouldn't buy my t-shirts. So when I started 12 years ago, almost all of my customers were foreigners. Then over the 12 years, things changed quite quickly. Nanluogu slowly became a very popular street, going from having 1 or 2 customers a day to having 100 customers a day. Now 90% of my customers to 95% of my customers are Chinese.
大家好，介绍给你我们新的实习生 Emma。这是燕子姐姐和哥。嗨，你好。
My artist and my fashion designer are both in their 20s, and I'm 45. So to understand the Chinese customer, I need to have young Chinese people on my team who understand that aesthetic and what young Chinese people want. The people in the stores, however, are all retired old ladies from Beijing. All used to work in the same department store in Beijing, which is the Futing department store. That was one of the very first department stores in China. And the reason we do that is because we want to create a Beijing experience. When you come to our stores, you want to meet someone who's from Beijing, someone who will remember you and give you that, that great sort of retail experience. When I started going to Nanluogu in 2003, even the taxi drivers had no idea where it was. But 12 years later, it's become so famous that we've had famous people from all around the world, from Boris Johnson to Angela Merkel, come into our store. Even my friends in England have heard of Nanluogu. The 25 years I've been here, this country has completely changed. And it's quite astounding to see what has happened here in terms of highways and trains and the sheer amount of people who have been brought out of poverty, which is about 600 million in the time that I've been here. It's really, you know, as people say, it's an economic miracle. For me, I feel incredibly grateful. I went from a backpacker to a successful businessman and a father of 4 daughters. And so I feel incredibly grateful to have been here during this time of great opportunity and development.